in the house. Today, we're doing Math Analysis, Chapter 4, Section 3, Transformations of Trigonometric Functions. I'm your host, Dr. D. Okay, so this section, we're going to be doing transformations of trigonometric graphs, which means moving our sine and cosine graphs up, down, right, and left. Yes, that's what we're doing. Okay, now, notice we have our A and our B that we had before. Now we're adding a C and a D. Now, the D is going to be responsible for the vertical motion. So we're moving the midline D units up or down. So if D is positive, moves it up. If D is negative, moves it down. Now there's a horizontal shift, or otherwise known as a phase shift. And this is moving left or right. Now, if you think of the entire box, then you're moving the left edge of the box negative C over B units right or left. In other words, it's the opposite direction as the sine of C. So if we have plus C, then we're moving it left C over B units. And if it's minus C, we'd be moving it right C over B units. Okay, so otherwise it's really all the same stuff that we've been doing. Okay, so we're going to sketch one period of this function. So y equals 2.5 sine pi over 4x plus 3 pi over 4 plus 6. So this is the whole thing all put together. So let's check out all our pieces first. So we've got A is 2.5, which means we're going up 2.5 and down 2.5 from the midline. Then we see that D is 6. So that means the midline is up 6. So basically we're starting at 6, going up to 8.5 and down to 3.5. So now then we want to look at the period. So the period equals 2 pi over pi over 4, which equals 2 pi times 4 over pi, which equals 8. And last, we have the horizontal shift, and that's going to equal negative 3 pi over 4 over pi over 4, which equals negative 3 pi over 4 times 4 over pi, which equals negative 3. Now you don't really need to reciprocate the bottom and flip it. Flip the bottom and multiply, because notice if you just see pi over 4 on top, pi over 4 on the bottom, cancel your pi over 4s, and you're left with just negative 3. So we have everything we need. It's time to make our graph. So first thing we see is that we're moving it up 6. So my y-axis is going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And now I'm going to go up 2.5. So we see that our midline is 6 up. So here's our midline. Okay, so The amplitude is 2.5, which means we're going up 2.5 from the midline and down 2.5 from the midline. So we basically just made the top and the bottom of the box. Now we know the period is 8, but we have a horizontal shift of -3. So that means we're going to go 1, 2, 3 to the left, and that's where our box starts. And then we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So from -3 to 5 is our period of 8. Okay, so we're ready to make our left and right side of our box from 3 and 5. Okay, so left, right, bottom, top. Now we have to cut our box into quarters. So half of 8 is 4. So we have 4 to the right, 4 to the left, and then half of 4 is 2. So there's 2 and there's 2. So now we have a sine curve, and that means we go middle, top, middle, bottom, middle. That's it, a beautiful curve. This is one period. So you find your midline from D. Then you find out how far up and down you go from A. Then you find out the period from 2 pi over the A. Then you find out the phase shift by going -c over B. And then, so now I know I'm moving left 3, but going a total of 8. And so I cut my box in quarters, and then I'm ready for the cosine or the sine curve, middle, top, middle, bottom, middle. If this had been everything the same except for cosine, then we just start at the top, middle, bottom, middle, top. That's it. Okay, speaking of cosine, let's do this secant graph. Okay, now remember, secant is just like cosine, so we're going to do all the calculations as if we're dealing with cosine. So first thing we realize is D equals -3. So that means I'm going down 3. Then A equals 2. So that means I'm going up 2 and down 2 from the midline. Then the period equals 2 pi over B, which is pi over 3. So notice this ends up being 2 pi times 3 over pi, which equals 6. So my period is 6. Now, what about my phase shift or my horizontal shift? So the horizontal shift is going to be negative of a negative pi over 2 over pi over 3, which equals pi over 2 times 3 over pi, which equals 3/2. So notice it's a minus here, but I'm moving it right 3/2. All right, so we have everything to construct our box. So let's do that. So we're going down 3 in a period of 6. Okay. So 1, 2, 3 down. There's our midline at y equals -3. Now, a is 2, which means the amplitude is 2, so that means I go up 2 and down 2. Okay, next. The period is 6, but it's moved right 1.5. So here's, I didn't actually need to go, I was thinking left in my mind, but okay, I'm just going right 1.5. So here's 1.5, so there's 2.5, 3.5, 4.5, 5.5. Okay, so our left edge is 3/2 to the right. And so that makes our right edge 6 beyond that. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And notice 7.5 minus 1.5 is 6. Okay, so here's our box. Now, we could trim it up a little bit if we want to, so let's just get rid of the excess. And what we could do here to make this a little more clear what's going on, this is -1, -2, -3, -4, -5. So you can see that the midline is at -3, and we're going up to -1, down to -5. Now, the next thing we do is we cut our box in half. So half of 6 is 3. So 1, 2, 3. It's going to be right here at the 4.5 point. And then half of 3 is 1.5. So 1.5 would make it right to the 3, and then right at the 6. So this is one period. Now, remember, the reciprocal of secant is cosine, so our cosine curve would start at the top, go to the middle, bottom, middle, and top. But we're not doing cosine curve, so wherever it would cross the middle is my vertical asymptote. And wherever it is at the top is my top value, and wherever it is at the bottom is my bottom value. So one period is going to approach the asymptote this way, and this way, and then this way, and that way. So there is your entire function. So once you get used to finding your midline and your amplitude from that, you have the top and the bottom of the box, then you find your period, which tells you the whole length of the box. Then you find where you start your box, and that's the horizontal shift. So we start our box 1.5 to the right and then go 6 from there. Now once I have my left and right and top and bottom of my box, I cut my box in fourths and then I'm cruising. Okay, so next example. Now we have tangent, and this is the amplitude changes, and we have a horizontal shift. No vertical shift, though. So let's check out all our pieces. So first thing, the amplitude is 2.5, and the period is pi over 0.5, which equals 2 pi. And then we have a horizontal shift of 1.5 over 0.5 to the left. It's plus. So horizontal shift is going to be negative 1.5 over 0.5, which equals negative 3. 15 over 5 is 3. Okay, so we're ready to draw our x and y axes. So we're going to be shifting left 3 and so here's 1, 2 and a half. Okay, now the period is 2 pi, so if this is 3 up to here, then pi would be right about here. Now remember, it's a tangent curve, so tangent must straddle the y-axis. So I'm going to put pi here and negative pi here. Now this would be the regular period if we had no horizontal shift. But we have a negative 3 horizontal shift. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this to, I'm going to move it, the whole thing, negative 3 or 3 to the left. So basically what this is negative 3 minus pi. And then this would be, I'm going to move the right side also, so it's going to be pi minus 3, which would be 0.14 approximately. Okay, so right. So I have my two asymptotes, and I know my tangent curve is right in the center of the period. So it's going to be just slightly to the right of my negative pi, because it's basically negative pi yeah, it's going to be 3 to the left. So the middle point would have been the y-axis, but now it's going to be 3 to the left of the y-axis, which is almost at negative pi. Okay, So we're ready to draw our curve. Now, the fact that amplitude is 2.5 means that 2.5 is the point that it's going to be when I go to the middle of the period. I'm going to go up 2.5. So the from the middle to the right edge is going to be up 2.5, and same thing, I'm going to go between the left edge and the middle, and I'm going to go down 2.5. All right, so now my curve is going to look like this. All right, so first thing we did was we found our amplitude, and our amplitude is saying how far up do you go when you're halfway, or you could really say a quarter of the period. Then the period is pi over A, or I'm sorry, pi over B. And now remember, it's pi over B, not 2 pi over B. So that's our period, 2 pi. But we shifted it left 3. So that means we're taking from, instead of negative pi to pi, which would be a 2 pi period, we're shifting that left 3. And so we have our 0 in the middle, and then it's going to be up to 2.5 and down to negative 2.5, and then you draw your curves. Okay, one more example. So we have y equals 2 tangent pi over 3x minus pi over 3 plus 3. So we've got all the stuff now. First thing, amplitude is 2. The vertical shift is 3, so we're going up 3. The period is going to be pi over 3, which is pi times 3 over pi, which is 3. So our period is going to be 3. Now, the horizontal shift is going to be negative of a negative, so that's pi over 6 over pi over 3, which is pi over 6 times 3 over pi, which is 1/2. Okay, so there's all the information that we need. So let's start our graph. So we're going up up 3. So here's 1, 2, 3 up. Now this is our new midline. So we'll just draw a dotted line here. So this is what the x-axis used to be. Now, we have an amplitude of 2. So it's up to 5 and down to 1. And we have a period of 3. Now remember, 3 would be from negative 1.5 to 1.5. See, the period of 3 has to straddle the y-axis. But now we're moving it left 1/2. So that means the left side is going to be at 2. And the right side, we're moving it. Wait, let's cut that. Okay, so the period is 3, which means it's going from negative 1.5 to positive 1.5, because you have to straddle the y-axis. Now we're moving it 1/2 to the right. That means the right edge is going to be at 1/2 to the right of 1.5. So that puts it at 2. And the left edge is at 1. So notice, midline is at 3. The left edge is at 1, a -1, and the right edge is at 2. So we have a period of 3, and it's been moved 1/2 to the right. Now, the only other thing we need is the amplitude being 2 means that when we're in the middle of the period, which the middle of the period is now 1/2 to the right. Okay, when I go half of this distance, so half of 1.5 would be 3/4, I would go up 2 instead of just up 1. So I'm going right halfway, and then I'm going 1, 2 up. And then when I go half this one, I go 2 down. And my curve is going to look like this. So it's tall and thin. With an amplitude of 2, it makes it taller, and with a period of 3, it's kind of compressed in, so it's tall and skinny. So this is it. All right, that's it. Have fun with these.
That's all, folks.